memoirs about what you're going to see. So tonight is an experiment. The dancers have not read the pieces and are unfamiliar with the music. They've been given small prompts about the setting and tone of each story, and in some cases an excerpt, but they are mostly in the dark. So they will be sharing your experience as the listener. They will be interpreting the story in real time. We hope that in our attempt to form these two mediums into one, we can highlight their differences, their through lines, and how the body can tell a story. How to perform prose has been a question Rose, Caleb, and I have batted around for a few months, and we landed on dance for reasons that will become clear to you in the next hour. We want to extend our appreciation to Dylan for hosting us tonight at Greenhouse Gallery. Without spaces like this, there couldn't be events like this. And we also encourage donations, and if you're curious how to do that, there's a board there with Venmo and Cash App listed, and then Dylan and I are also walking around. Yeah, feel free to sit. Obviously, we are doing that already. If anyone needs anything to be more comfortable, please don't hesitate to ask. And then our first reader tonight is Caleb Carpin. His work can be found at calebcarpin.neocities.org, and he also has some printed material on the table with a mirror on it. Thank you so much.
All right, so I'm going to do a very short introduction. So I originally wrote this story after I read a pop science article about a fruit juice corporation that was allowed to dump industrial waste into a national park. This doesn't sound like a very good story. It sounds horrifying. But this part of the national park in Costa Rica was like nutritionally depleted, if you will. So what initially formed was a hellscape sludge of like black fly larvae. 20 years later, what formed was a glorious biodiverse paradise. So this story is about the possibility for good. I've only got time to read the first part, so if you prefer the Kantian tradition, that's going to be God. If you want to read about the soul, and if you want to read about freedom, just pick up a copy. All right, this is Maggottscape by Caleb Carpin. At the edge of the Maggottscape lie modernist, cautionary tales in striped yellow-black, future-proofed sign types adapted from brethren portending the dangers of radiation, warnings on the energized particle re-rendered, exchanged for destructions not only inflicted upon the flesh, but made from it. Atomic emissions, sloughed tissue, and failing organs, supplanted by orgiastic botanical contaminant, or host cortices scrambled, cellular mechanisms deposed, by the despairing poisons of freshwater cnidarians, vomiting, delirium, induced by envenomed macropredator, perfect teardrops of neurotoxic coagulant falling from saber-fanged mouth, rather than radiative holy fire. Trefoil of ionizing blade for curling hazardous flower, gamma ray for fungoid bloom, decay of carcasses freshly killed, rather than heavy metals into lead. A semiotics denuclearized and made nucleic. The dimensional carnage of ruined flesh depicted in planar, matte icon. Torn limbs flattened into avoidance insignia, sawtooth free from blocky, rectilinear torsos. Displaced viscera prophesied in thermoplastic marking paint. Signages unfouled by the scent of death, shrieking silently, beware. Beyond these ideograms of repulsive might, esteeming no deeds and shunning their creators hoped, every traveler, or contrived the spatial hostilities. Thorn garden of blunted rancor, planted approximately as halo, as glare, in neck-thick protrusions of concrete and oxidated steel. Caltrops of giants, spines committed somehow each at an angle toward the throat. Among them, tower chimes wavering in the voices of the fears of prey. Deterrent architecture wreathed in mists of millennial lifespan. depressed from their hydrologic evaporative destiny via molecular scale petrochemical cage. Heavied fog, the color of naturalistic inversion, ill-omened bioflavonoid ochre, pollinators repulsed, symbioses fractured, stench which required no human engineering, of ferment and caul and casings shed. Lane, this all, to circumvent that only mortal local sin, veneration. After all, a shrine, even to horror, still lures. That which enclosed the maggotscape arranged instead as mundanity to horror, temporarily dehumanized zone, set upon by thousand-year engineered gaze to impede rather than exalt. Horror intended here to camouflage itself within the mirror of the world, an open-air vault standing in resemblance to its landscape rather than as distinctive spectacle. Wastes uninterred by meters of granite, soil, or seawater, cordoned off and left simply alone. Yet within boundary lies demarcation's perversity, provocation and deterrent, emitted in parallax. Partition designs into itself fabled allure. Labyrinths may guard only the valuable. Walled and hidden danger always worthy, at very least worth the populated, constructive glance of those who erected their facilities of concealment. Barrier as phototactic lantern, tempter of vandals, attractor beacon to iconoclasts. Barrier as obstruction, path and terrain cleave to realty, stockpiled desire. These are the inverted language of maggotscape, where forbidden and valued exchange position with respiratory ease. Thus came anterior genesis. Then, at the beginning, there was not the word. There was the matted, sucking waste of artificial bioavailability, ecology that squirmed in sequestered, writhing mass, nymph-weighted land of geographical stagnation, evolutionarily athrum with the identities and futures of the teeming. Never any somethings for nothings. Instead, and only the brazen sufficiency of reproduction. In this, the sacrificial oasis resides hallowed ground upon which mammalian mothers of anthropic myth fail further in their summary of nature. Concurrent thrivings of an insectile, bacteriophilic whole could never here be mispresumed. Queens absent, vertebrae and maternality, neither matriarchs attendant nor conquer empresses, the birthright of these endless mothers, fertility assumpted, offspring produced unceasingly and without delay, hereditary divinity or colonial seizure, lacking purchase of any kind against unbound, layering grime, and the waiting slander within. Botfly larvae, life cycles surely incomplete, of what they will parasitize unknown. Soft-bodied caterpillars fatten endlessly, refusing metamorphosis. Dislocated eugobes squirm in their eudaimonia of slop, far, far from crushing benthic homes. Flatworms allied as omnivorous rolling swarm churn over themselves toward corpses, fungi, eggs laid, in meters-wide locomotory parade. Fruiting bodies polyp from mycelial mats in the image of stalked censer, river delta, architectonic spandrel, microcrater. Gel glob filled and complete with nervous radiative ejecta. Spattered lagoons, scummed by processes adjacent to decay, hold white jutted bones of exhausted trees, yellow-gray jaws of clotted beasts. Algal cosmopolises and brine shrimp colored most brilliantly in ultraviolet, aquamarine. Discarded researches from the original industrial waste there too, lacking either in morphological or economic rigidity and unable, in either case, to be manufactured at dividended, shareholder-satisficing scale. Tar pits of coagulated substrate, intended once as biogenically homeostatic, regenerative asphalt, doomed now to mire. Leech neurons, Turing incomplete, but firing all the same, of grade school arithmetic talent. hemiparasitic bioweapons that ravaged formerly the staple crops of foreign powers blithely choke wild rice, crabgrass. Schooled bacterial factories, genetically condemned to produce the legalistic building blocks of financially extinct genomic material scams, proprietary nucleotide chains, junk alleles, to have been inlaid among the innocent genetic code of domesticated fauna, sufficient grounds for patent reclamation transfigured now into heritable bioflourishing accelerant. Meat and offal and bone, marketed previously as lab-grown and freed entirely from cruelty, twitching, rotting, in profane mimicry of animal life. Household, omnivorous piglets which once, cutely, ate vegetable peelings, discarded plastics, polystyrene, root now among their artificial wombs, congealed substitute for an instinctively recalled migration back towards spawning grounds. Fated all now the same, pour from loom-mouthed outtake ducts toward their various resting places of gravitational minima, or to sup gently upon those self-same stagnant pools. Maggotscape lacks at all a furious core which adulterates or empowers its surroundings entire, then merely habitat, archetypal, crawling things at the bottom, flitting things at the top. Intact histories of the biosphere seeping through, summarized in disjunctive clarity by the artifice oasis. Everything feral, and what insect or bacterium is not. Descendant vulture, migratory flamingo sequentially clothed in the ever more exotic pigments of local crustaceans. Bats which feast, keen eyes made loathsome by phosphorescent symbiote, present these all as visitor. Subordinate to the clonal, fecund density of the resident. And when this secreted hollow pupates, and secondary chrysalis occurs, putrid and unremarkable in its reformation among so many others, these lands will again be different. I will again be different.
Wow. Thanks so much again to Caleb. Give it up. Our second reader this evening is Joel Worford, who graduated from the Iowa Writers Workshop this year. Congratulations to Joel. You can find his work in Tri-Quarterly, the Chestnut Review, Hayden's Ferry Review, the Laurel Review, and beyond. His short story, The Word, was named a Distinguished Story in Best American Short Stories 2023, and his story, No Clubs, appears in Best Small Fictions 2024. At the end of this month, he will be in California participating in the Napa Valley Writers Conference. Thanks so much to Joel for making the time to join us.
Thank you, Avery, and thank you for organizing this. This is awesome, and yeah, I'm really excited to be reading for y'all. I'm going to read a short piece called Don't Touch. It's you'll hear the whole thing. It's only 2 pages. Trying to think. I don't have a book or anything out, but if you want to, support me, you can just follow me on Instagram. It's just at Joel Worford, at my name. So yeah, this is Don't Touch. I don't think you need any context for this one. I hope you enjoy it. Don't touch. Had a pastor once told me I should hurt a little bit when you're praying to Jesus. preached for 2 hours every Sunday morning. Told him if the Lord was keeping us close to have us squirm, he should consider retirement. Pastor didn't like that comment, ha ha ha. Watched him confirm Henry's son into the church. Cried while he did it. Cries too often for me to trust he ever means it. Says queer folks won't make it. Watched him love a girl named Sydney, 17 years old, wore a white dress and a silver watch to Sunday church. Showed up on Saturday too with her daddy. Her daddy's name is Elmo, goes by the red name rather than Thomas. Would have made a better preacher than the pastor if God took votes. Never hit his little girl as far as I've heard it. Let her yawn during the sermon, and that's what caught the eye of the pastor. The preacher and her daddy got into a fight, and that's why she started to sit up and sit still during the sermon and listen. Heard the preacher broke Big Elmo's eye socket, and the big Papa Elmo didn't throw a single punch. Heard the pastor's wife brought out a carton of eggs to the backyard and started chucking them. Heard that Big Papa slept on home in blood and milk. She had a pretty voice, but it was quiet. Only ever heard it when she got the words wrong. I think she liked it best when we sang By and By because it reminded her of Elvis. She'd sing it real pretty and a little bit stronger than the other hymns, like she was imagining that she was singing to the king or that she was him singing. Her hair was golden. The pastor's skin was bronze, and I thought it looked pretty when she was leaning on his neck and her hair drooped over it. Straight and long, like the road through Kansas would be if it had been paved with gold, and it had been cut off at the small of her back, and there were little daisies woven into it. Saw her at the market one Saturday morning, putting 2 lemons up to her eyeballs, and smiling with her friends, and faking the deacon's voice and laughing. Now she did. Pastor said he was going to take her to go swimming one Friday morning. There's a lake down near the church. Nobody in the town minded about their being acquainted until the Lord started minding. Their love brought the locusts. And the water never did part, not for her nor for her Moses. Told her he was going to take her out of state to see the mountains. Told her if she prayed close enough, she could find God behind a righteous man's zipper. Yes, sir. He preached to her in whispers rather than in his big, hard pulpit voice, and she felt special for it. When he was at the front, he wouldn't look at her, and greeted folks after church. He just shook her hand and frowned and nodded. 25 years old, that pastor. I'd seen him grow up that way, just like her. Neither one of them could help it. Not even Jesus could have helped him or her, given the circumstance. They would rent a boat, but the boat got taken. That's just what I heard. That lake's no good for swimming, but it's the one we use for baptisms. Don't know what the pastor intended to do with that girl out on that boat. Caught him screaming at the sky once because it was raining. His wife was out of town that day preaching. She was trying to get her life devoted to spreading the teachings of Jesus. Pastor liked her being away more than he disliked what she was doing when she was off doing it. The girl wanted to swim in the lake, and he told her there were alligators. There ain't no alligators. The girl took her shirt off, and he did too. He stared at her and nodded, and she looked at him looking over her, and then she looked him up and down, and she nodded too. She came over to where he was shivering, and she put her hand onto his necklace. He didn't close his eyes or lift one finger against her. She put his cross to her mouth and ran her tongue upon it. He started to weep. She liked that, I heard. I heard that because I got good hearing. The trees were far enough into the water to be up to their waist in it. The sky was clear that day, and the fowl had instruments. Most folks in the town hadn't woken up yet. He walked towards the water and took her hand. I don't swim, she said to him. Your shoes will be all right. It's too cold for swimming. We'll pray on it. He grinned and she followed him. There wasn't a cloud to keep the sun's look off the earth. They went into the water, wading like the song says. He was humming By and By, but she wouldn't squeeze his hand or look towards it. She was looking at the water, watching it. She knew how much water could hold inside of it, and how much more it could take of us than we could of it. He told her to look at him, but she ignored him. I was on the other side of town eating breakfast. I was sitting next to Henry Adamson, who was sitting beside his wife, situated under the television. Heard a gunshot go off. Teddy laughed about something Big Elmo had told him. Big Papa hadn't even flinched to hear his daughter getting shot. 2 days later, they found him in Virginia. Wouldn't tell what happened, but his hand got cut off. Since then, I ain't seen him. That's the preacher I was mentioning who got his hand chopped off, not Big Papa Elmo. Elmo's doing all right, he's recovering. And that child couldn't swim, but she wanted to go swimming. Folks ought to remember how children are foolish. She changed her mind all the time when she was looking at him. She was changing all the time, and he could feel it, which made him crazy for her. The thing about God is God don't change, but God ain't a woman. And if God were a woman, they'd all be cursed, all the ones out preaching so sure he ain't one. I loved a child once who looked just like me, but we weren't nothing alike. She was inconstant. I'm like the floor of the ocean that nobody's reached yet. I'm like the sky above that we ain't polluted. I'm a planet you ain't never visited, and an island filled with savages who can't talk. I tell Jesus he can look, but even when the Son of Man asks for you to come near him, I tell him don't touch.
Thanks so much again to Joel. We're going to have Julia speak on her dance project, her dance, and with other dancers that are in the room. And then maybe a 5-minute intermission if anyone wants to go to the bathroom and smell the air outside. And then we'll be back with our last reader. Great.
Hey. I'm a little winded. Don't know why. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Dylan, Rose, Avery, Joel, Caleb, everyone. I'd like to shout out this group dancers over here. Me and I run PS project together. You'll see her this evening. This is our 3rd season. Sorry, I'm out of breath. This is our 3rd season, so we'll be performing at Firehouse in December. However, opportunities like this are like right at home with what we envision for PS. So thank you so much for witnessing. Yeah, thank you again so much. I guess we'll take a breather and then you'll see one last piece from everyone.
Alright, I'm really excited to introduce our last reader of the evening. Her name is Rose Ray. She was incredibly instrumental in making tonight possible. Her short story Vanilla is forthcoming in the fall issue of the Raleigh Review, and she has printed material on the table as well. Thank you so much, Rose, and thank you to everybody who was here and a part of this.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming here today. I'm going to be reading a story. I'll give you a little context. This takes place in the mid-1700s in colonial Norfolk. And I think the rest is self-explanatory. It's called Universal Lathe. I see no explanation other than God having created a completely amoral universe. Why else would water of all depths take the innocent and drown them? I saw that once when I was small. The neighbor child, dead after tipping headfirst into a wash bucket. Another thing I saw around that age was a woman force-feed a dog lye. She had fed the dog lye because she was losing her mind after the birth of her first child and thought the dog was speaking to her, giving her evil commands. It took the dog 2 days of stumbling around yelping to die, and when it did, it lay there in the road, and no one came to pick it up and take it somewhere more dignified to decompose. My husband believes that God set the universe into motion and then took his hands off it. Mankind has steered all else into being with or without his reason, his will. I ask then, why does God, having created all of this, refuse to intervene? Is he even watching? And if he is, does it please him what goes on down here? He must like this life, having made it. Or could he not help but make it? Did all of the world to come pour out of him like blood? Perhaps the helpless pouring out made him feel ashamed. Perhaps that's why he's left us here alone. Or maybe he died. But if he died, then what is that band of intelligence I feel? That live thread, pulling and snapping? I have more than once before stepped into the weave of that massive instrument and gotten caught. A dead dove fell on the doorstep the day before my mother's spirit was called away from her old body. The very air in my nose was different then. Ordinary objects sparkled with deep meaning. Other times, life is so dull, I understand nothing and feel entirely alone. You could be a man, my husband used to say. Sure, obviously, the line between man and woman is one of the world's thinnest. He meant it as a compliment, but also sometimes a warning. As in, you sound like a man, be careful. Are you really a woman at all? When we were still young, my husband accused me of adultery with one of his employees, an Irishman named Oren. Oren had never paid much attention to me until the day I came to the workshop to see the new lathe. He and another man stood at either end of the machine, turning a brass workpiece between the stocks. Oren called me over and bared his teeth and grinning. He told me that this was a gear here on the lathe, a gear for the inside of a clock. His snarled accent, the scar on his face, that beam of attention. It's true I felt desire for him then. At the very same moment, my husband came around the corner, returning with a dish for some scones that I had brought. Several nights then passed. Enough that I had decided it was safe to stop worrying, when my husband rolled over in bed and held my face gently in his hands, the first time he had touched me in months. You might be interested in this, he whispered. Were you aware that in some societies an adulteress is liable to have her nose cut off for her indiscretions, so that no man will ever want to touch her again? I wonder if such a thing could ever happen here, if men would allow it. Maybe, if it was understood the kind of woman this was. The benefits of acts far more barbaric really may be argued. They have been. When he felt his message had been delivered, he slipped off of me and disappeared beneath the covers like a snake. I laid up, staring at the ceiling until the birds started singing. Had he really said this, or was I dreaming? The next morning, all trace of malice was gone from him. He appeared uninterested in me, like I was some minor pest preparing his breakfast with a knife in my apron, ready to be drawn, ready to kill him. 3 days later, I packed a few things and ran away from that house and went to the inn that my sister and her husband operated just a short ways downriver on the harbor. She lent me a room there. I know not how long I stayed. It could have been a few days, it could have been a month. One night, the night I want to tell you about, I lay awake in the quiet room until I grew tired of thinking and got up to dress and tie a bonnet around my head. In the hallway outside, my sister sat on the floor, scrubbing the baseboards by candlelight with her 3-month-old twins strapped to her back. She halted her brush in its place and looked at me. Where are you going? A walk, I said. Why, it's nearly 10 o'clock. Plenty of people out still, I said, and the moon is full. My sister narrowed her tired eyes at me and resumed scrubbing. As I descended the stairs, one of the babies got to screaming, then the other. The next street over from my sister's place was this coffee house. Men came to this place to exchange quotations from books that they had read, and the repeating of these quotations, sometimes one of them would generate a novel idea, which got the rest of them hopeful that they soon, too, might think of something new. I stood across the street, close enough to hear the excitement, and read the largest typeface on a broadside tacked up to the door. Addressed to all true-born sons of liberty, it said. Those were ambitious men, men concerned with pure ideals. My husband was respected then, he still is, as not only a businessman, but a man of letters. Not a politician exactly, but content to hang around them. He wrote dispatches to the newspaper, his thoughts on the crown, the fate of the colonies. This was about 1767. Like many, he had become incensed by import duties, the taxes levied on necessary materials, and the purchase of that lathe had nearly bankrupted us. Just the night before, I sold my hair to a wig maker, a woman who wrestled around a wet wad of tobacco in her mouth as she sheared it all off up to my ears. I wasn't proud, but I was running out of money, already in debt to my sister. I stood watching the candle flames jump in the coffee house windows before venturing closer. Inside there, I saw a piece of a long table and a quill, some hardened yellow wax. A waistcoat stepped in front of my picture, and I glanced up to find the fresh, shaven side of my husband's face. He stood there nodding at some man seated there beyond the window frame. My heart kicked up into my throat, and I walked away dizzy. I wasn't afraid of him. How many nights had I been missing from his house? It would have taken no great investigator to think of looking in my sister's place first. This is how bloodless he had become towards me. I wished he would come and take my nose. In fending him off, I'd be able to sneak some kisses on his ear while I kneed him in the balls. No, I wasn't afraid of him. My heart had only set to pounding like that because it was dark, and I was alone, and had recalled again the fact that yes, soon now I would have to start selling more than my hair if I really was going to go about this new life without him. I was headed west. The sea had come over the harbor in the form of a hot, salted mist. Here I walked without purpose, kicking along a fish's eyeball that someone had left in the street until it got stuck between two cobblestones. I stopped to squish it with my toe. Looking up, I saw I was in front of a house with its door propped open, light and voice poured out. I climbed the steps to see inside. A man, a handsome young preacher, stood and spoke before a hearth. I held myself in the doorway, looking deeper within to see a parlor full of women. They were of all ages, taking up chairs or kneeling on the floor with Bibles on their hearts. "Some of you," said the preacher, "should you be carried right now into heaven, the first prayer on your lips would be to be taken straight to hell instead, for the burning torture of the flesh would be more agreeable to your nature." If only you could hear how the women moaned then. Those women were desperate for pleasure and hadn't thought of anywhere better than here to get it. They were ashamed of their own minds, how sometimes they must think quickly, meaninglessly, as I do, of killing their husbands or their children or themselves. Sometimes they must be walking past a cart of vegetables and see a cob of corn and think, I could probably put that cob of corn inside me and fit at least halfway. One of the younger girls shot up. "The devil is here," she said, "and he's speaking to me." She then fell writhing to the floor. "How will I be saved?" she cried. The preacher smiled with obscene benediction. "For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth." "Chasteneth me, Lord," she pleaded. "Young woman," the preacher said. He had now turned to me where I stood in the doorway. "Would you care to come in and be saved?" An old skeleton sitting on the nearest sofa reached out her hand to me. "Come in and lay your sins on the ground." I'll tell you what I did then. I spat on the floor and I walked away down the harbor. The preacher shouted after me on the stoop. "Hell must have its vassals. The Lord decided long ago who will be granted access to the kingdom and who will be among the fallen." I'll tell you another thing. I was jealous of that coffee house where men read the great thinkers and asked questions of the deepest value. What is justice? What is freedom? And what is truth? For there were no doors left open to me, no bright chamber of intellect I could enter. Not even the door to our bedroom, where countless times I had lain with my husband and we had asked each other these questions, tapped at the locks of these divine secrets. He and I were like one mind. Talking deep into the night, we traversed the lines on God's giant palm. Somewhere along the way, we'd gotten separated and now I was alone on that terrain, trying to feel my way back in the dark. I walked along until I saw a good place to sit by the water and cry. Perhaps everything would be all right if I returned to my husband's house, I thought, and confessed falsely, prostrated myself before him and begged for his mercy. No different, after all, from all those ladies pleading Jesus' forgiveness for imaginary crimes. I wished I'd just slept with Oren. The thought had occurred to me, hadn't it? I'd rather give credit to demons, but I know these thoughts are mine. They come squeaking up all the time from some cold place inside me. There I sat on the harbor's edge crying and feeling sorry for myself and watching my reflection in the smooth dark water until a face appeared beside me. It smelled of tobacco. "I remember you," said the woman who bought my hair. She poked my cheek and pulled her beard to her lips. "Don't cry," she said. "I like you. I see myself in you." "It was when Lydia died," I began to tell her. I don't know why. That's when he decided to turn bloodless towards me. She was ill when she was born and lived only a month and a half. My husband, he wanted to bury her as soon as the breath left her, but me, I said we had to wait until she'd gone cold. That's what Mommy had done with Will. I screamed and I cried and I beat on my husband. I even bit him. He told me that I wasn't acting like a good wife and I wanted to be good for him. I did, so we laid Lydia down that very day in a box in a hole in the ground. How worried was I that we had buried her too soon.
I laid awake 4 nights until a fever bound me to bed. I had visions of my mother who scorned me. We were too hasty to bury her. She was still warm. Jesus help me.
My friend had fallen asleep on my shoulder, brown juice leaking from her mouth down onto the front of my dress. I stole the bottle of beer from her hands and got up and left her there. I walked around, drinking from the bottle until I found a crowd of people, whores and drunkards and some children banging on drums, moving towards a commotion near my sister's inn, where a man was being held by a small mob. He'd been stripped naked, bound by hands and feet, and now cried out in pain as they took turns painting his body from a bucket of steaming pine tar. I saw one friend of my husband's among the mob, then another. Then at last, my dear husband himself, his wig laid all stiff and sideways on his head. I pushed forward to the inner ring of spectators, where our eyes quickly found one another, lovers until the end. I untied my bonnet and let it fall to the ground. He stared at me with his mouth open, so dumbfounded by my baldness that the victim managed to wrestle free from under his arm, but the escape was frantic, impotent, impossible. Bound, the poor man slid on the whetstones and fell on his face. My husband adjusted his wig, then bent down, turned the man over, and presented him with a kick to the groin. Meanwhile, a young uniformed customs agent was trying to intervene, running around, shouting, "This man is a captain! Unhand him!" "He's a spy is what he is," someone said. "We're only trying to unload this cargo." The crowd threw rotten eggs and oyster shells as he gestured towards a huge weather-worn ship full of the things that we wanted to buy. Sugar, he explained, rum, and slaves. That's when I saw 3 women and 2 men standing there by the gangplank, sickly and jaundiced, wearing molded swaths of fabric roped to one another and shipped here among barrels from Antigua or Barbados or Guyana. I took the final swallow of beer and sucked hungrily at the beer-tasting air inside the bottle. Nothing made sense, but I got the feeling that it had all nonetheless been placed here, piece by piece, with keen deliberation. Then what rough hand was it that calibrated this scale? A scale that could weigh a human soul against a quart of rum or a pound of sugar. It came to me then that all beings should be free. If I were the all-knowing Almighty God and I were turning the world into being, I would not be able to compromise this, not for any reason. I would sooner create nothing. I would be content to live out my eternity alone in the darkness. What happened next, it gets harder to remember with each passing day. My husband doesn't like to talk about the past. He sits in his chair and looks out the window, and I stand over by the fire. But once in a while, I know we're both thinking about it. The pillowcase is full of goose feathers stolen from my sister's place. How the Sons of Liberty coated the captain until his mouth and his eyes were 2 dark screaming holes in a snowbank. How they then sat him up on a fence rail and paraded him through town before finally circling back to bring their creation to the harbor's edge and toss it headlong into the water. Yes, then and other times, our Lord God has revealed himself to me.
Thank you so much, Prose, and all of the dancers. Please give it up for all of them. And once again, huge shout out to Dylan, who is on my left. All right, yeah. Please consider donating if you haven't already. And just want to plug my next event, which will be Music as Poetry, Poetry as Music. It will also be here August 19th. There'll be performances by Pygmy Lush, Nabil, and myself, and then readings by Matthias Splolina, Ran, Michaela Karen, and Elizabeth Whitmire. Talk to the readers, talk to the dancers. Thank you so much. Additionally, shout out to Gab as well and Worford for